Thalie Martini, CEO of Breast Cancer UK, and welcome to the Be Well podcast. Today, I'm joined by a guest who I met a few years ago at the Pink Ladies World Cancer Day conference. And this guest has actually been on a fascinating and a unique journey. When I first met her, she was completing her PhD and had published a really insightful paper on public understanding of endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. And actually, that's an area that Breast Cancer UK is really interested in because we fund research into the links between exposure to EDCs and breast cancer. But actually today, my guest has morphed into an influencer and founder of Sober Social Island, which is a community safe space for anyone who is sober or sober curious. And I really love that. And let's find out more. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Dr. Melissa Kelly. Thank you so much for joining me, Melissa.
Hi, Thalie. It's so nice we get to chat again after a few years.
It is really lovely to see you again and to hear about your journey. So you and I first met when you presented your study on public awareness and risk perceptions of endocrine disrupting chemicals, which was a really interesting insight into what people know, what the public know about EDCs. But since then, your work has mostly centered around empowering people on their sobriety journey, and you're the founder of Sober Social Island. So it's really clear that you've become quite passionate about this. And before I ask you the question, I also want to recommend that listeners read the lovely blog that you wrote for Breast Cancer UK. My relationship with alcohol was taking a weird turn. But Melissa, how much did the experience you had during that particular time in your life, how much did that inform your decision to focus on sobriety, but also to bring awareness to this topic?
Yeah, so whenever I was doing my PhD, as you said, I was doing it at Queen's University in Belfast, and my PhD was focused on risk communication of harmful environmental chemicals, particularly endocrine disrupting chemicals. And so part of that PhD, it was a very well-funded PhD. I got paid a salary to do it. It was part of a really prestigious research program. And so I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders some of the time, a little bit of imposter syndrome as it's known today. And I was almost feeling like I was living this double life in a way. I had this prestigious career during the week, and at the weekends, I was in my early 20s, so I was living in Belfast, and I was going out, and I was drinking, and I was having fun with my friends. And, I felt like I was using alcohol in an unhealthy way. And I think it's important to say that my sobriety journey started long before I quit drinking. I quit drinking in May of 2020, but I had been interested in learning about sobriety for many years before that. And I realized during the pandemic, which is when I quit, that this would be a very unique opportunity for me to quit. I actually shouldn't say quit, because at the beginning, my goal was to just take a 30-day break. And I feel like that's a much more approachable way to look at things for many people. And I really got clear on why I was doing that. And for me specifically, it was me noticing a lot of unhealthy behaviors around alcohol, thinking about it constantly during the week, having cravings every weekend to go out and drink. And I was really using it in an unhealthy way to kind of cope with a lot of the stress that I was feeling with my job and a lot of the imposter syndrome. And I had moved to Belfast and I didn't really know anybody there. And I really struggled to make friends, and it was quite a lonely time. And then add in the pandemic, and it was, just the icing on top. And as I said, my PhD was focused on risk communication. And as I finished that, I was about 1 year sober whenever I graduated and got my PhD. And I really saw an opportunity for me to kind of combine these two areas of my life that I was very passionate about, which was communicating the science and the research behind different lifestyle factors in a way that can really have a positive impact on you if you make these certain changes. And then also my sobriety journey. And through doing that, I started sharing a lot on social media. I was posting on TikTok and Instagram, sharing about my journey because, that was such an integral part of my own recovery, is hearing other people's stories. And so I started doing that. And the more I shared it, the more the shame started to lift around how I was feeling about my own behavior. People were reaching out to me saying, I live in Belfast as well. Can we meet for a coffee? I'm feeling like this too. And I feel as though in the, alcohol awareness space, we're kind of moving away from it now, but even a few years ago, it almost seemed as if there were only two kinds of drinkers, a normal drinker and an alcoholic. But what we know now is there's that gray area in between where maybe you're only drinking once or twice a week, but it's really negatively affecting you. And so I just saw that as an opportunity. And it's not like I woke up one day and decided, oh yeah, I'm going to pursue this and creating awareness. It's just, as you know, it's just something that evolves over time.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, this grey area of drinking that you talk about. And I think, you've been really honest with your story, but I think you'll probably agree that, and you've mentioned it yourself, the kind of shame, the stigma around talking about struggles with alcohol is such a barrier, despite actually so many people having this issue. And really interestingly, there's a recent alcohol change study that found that 27% of all drinkers in Great Britain actually binge drink on their heaviest drinking days. So that's over 8 units, I think, for men and over 6 for women. And I think that's a pretty decent chunk of society. And as you say, we only generally think about this as a problem if someone loses their livelihood or if they're going into rehab. But that's not everyone's experiences. A lot of those people are fully functioning, as you say, and they kind of sit in that grey area and can be very high achieving, even like you were. So can you maybe, given that, drawing on your research and your psychology background, can you maybe share with us the science and explain to us a bit the science behind how the unhealthy drinking relationships can be formed, and more importantly, what are the steps that can be taken to get control back?
Yeah. Well, with regards to how it forms, I mean, each camp has their own dogma as to how someone, develops an alcohol abuse disorder. But really, in my opinion, it has to just come down to how we're conditioned. We're conditioned to drink, from such an early age, watching our parents, watching TV, going out, social conditioning, messaging around drinking to cope with positive and, negative feelings and positive ones as well, right? We're taught champagne when we're celebrating. If you've had a bad day, have some wine. We see it in all the rom-coms, all the movies and TV and everything. And as I said, everyone kind of has their own unique perspective on how it develops. I mean, first and foremost, alcohol is, highly addictive. Ethanol, the chemical, is highly addictive. And so a lot of people tend to think and I felt this way too, that it was a moral failure on my part that I wasn't able to regulate or manage this substance in my life, where it's actually a highly addictive substance that you become, less tolerant to over time. You need to have more of it to get more of the effect that you want. But everyone has their own view as to how it develops. I personally, what I've read and how I've studied and what I see from the science is that it really is the result of habitual behavior, having that cue, craving, response, reward, the cue sometimes even being the subconscious beliefs that we hold or that we're seeing in our lives, the subconscious biases that we have. For example, you need to drink to have fun. You need to drink when you're out with your friends, all of these little beliefs that we pick up along the way. Or even in many cases, the cue could be an emotion. For a lot of us, we're drinking subconsciously because we're upset with something, we're unhappy with ourselves, we're lost, we're lonely. For me personally, I realized that one of the habitual cues as to why I was drinking was because I was very bored. All I did on the weekend was, drink with my friends, be hungover, and, not really do much else the rest of the weekend. I wasn't really stimulating myself. I'm someone who's very creative, and, I have so many hobbies now in sobriety that I never would have done if I was drinking. And I realized whenever I did quit drinking and I was, sitting with the cravings as you do on a Friday, just trying to, get through those first early few weeks, I realized how bored I actually was. And that the boredom was actually a cue for me to start craving alcohol, because what happens when your brain, whenever you respond to a craving with alcohol is you teach your brain, oh, we're feeling discomfort, which is the boredom. Boredom is actually not a very fun emotion to feel. We're feeling this discomfort. in the past, alcohol has taken that away. We don't have to, we get that buzz, we get that dopamine hit from the alcohol, and we're suddenly feeling a lot better. So that is the reward. We're literally rewarding our brain with alcohol and teaching. That's the reward system in our brain, is how we learn. So we're teaching ourselves that when we're bored or when we're upset or when we're unhappy or scared, lonely, whatever emotion it is, that alcohol solves that. Even though logically, when we can take a step back, and this is where the mindset kind of helps, is it's not actually solving that. I'm not bored because I'm not drinking. I'm bored because I'm not filling my life with things that stimulate me, or I'm not having connections with people that are meaningful, right? So that's kind of the framework that I see it through, which is, that real cue, craving, response, and reward system that creates a habit. And I think that when we do that, we can kind of take a step back and not see it again as a moral failing on our part, but rather this is a mechanism that, that's how our brains work. And we can work to unlearn the same way we work to learn. Like, for example, sitting with the craving and allowing the craving to pass, your brain will then learn, oh, we don't actually get the reward of alcohol whenever we're feeling this anymore. And it's almost like that toxic ex-boyfriend who keeps, let's say you break up, and they keep texting you and they're asking you, hey, sorry, I'm late on rent. Could you pay for whatever? And you keep responding. That ex-boyfriend learns like, oh yeah, if I text her, I get the money, I get my rent, and it's all easy. But if you stop responding, eventually they'll get the hint and they'll learn, oh, I'm not getting what I want from this, so I'm going to go somewhere else. And that's kind of similar to how our brain works with regards to responding to those cravings with alcohol. It's just about sitting with those cravings and not responding with alcohol, which sounds very simple and very easy. It's actually very difficult for a lot of people, but that's basically my view of the whole thing through that habit framework.
When you put it that way, it does make a lot of sense. That it's, I suppose both ways. You can train yourself to turn to alcohol because of those, those feelings that you have of loneliness or other issues, but you can equally do it the other way around. One thing about us at Breast Cancer UK is that we're very aware that alcohol is actually a very well-established risk factor for breast cancer. In fact, studies have shown that about 8% of breast cancer cases that are diagnosed in women are actually linked to alcohol consumption. So, reducing alcohol is really important because that amounts to about 4,400 women every year whose breast cancer is linked to their drinking. We're a breast cancer prevention charity. We're always looking for ways to get the message out there, but actually it can be quite difficult to do so because without making people feel like they're being judged. And, our prevention quiz is great. It allows people to have a look at their drinking journey. And a lot of people come back and say, we would like to reduce our alcohol. But how do we broach this conversation with more empathy and importantly, remove that shame around it?
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting phenomenon, which is, risk communication, right? Like, how do we tell people how bad this thing is without having them completely turn around and blame themselves for it? And sort of, a lot of the times we can overwhelm people with information and facts and science and research and statistics. And at that point, it's too much. And they turn away and they said, well, there's no point in doing anything anyway. That's something that I found through working with people to understand their awareness of endocrine disrupting chemicals. They're ubiquitous, they're everywhere, they're in everything, they're in the environment, they're naturally occurring. How do we, tell people to stay away from these or reduce the amount that they're being exposed to these? And it's a similar thing with alcohol. I mean, nobody wants to hear how bad alcohol is. It's, alcohol is one of those, it's the only drug that you have to justify not taking, actually, is a common phrase in the sobriety community. And it is a very difficult thing to give up. And I post a lot on social media, and I never post with the intent of disrupting or getting people agitated or anything like that. But so I very rarely receive any hate or any trolling or anything. But the one... It is. Sometimes I do, but it's usually kind of funny and I can laugh about it. People telling me, oh, can I come to this event and bring some alcohol? Or people saying this video made me want to have a drink. And I'll be like, have one for me. But The only time that people have ever gotten very agitated was a video that I made where I basically said drinking organic wine is the same as saying you're going to go drink or you're going to go smoke organic cigarettes.
Yeah.
Because any of the benefits that you're getting from removing pesticides or reducing pesticides to make the wine organic is not outweighing any of the risk that is ethanol, right? And people have a very hard time and taking that information in. So I'd be interested to hear from you, like what has your experience been with sharing the science side of things? But for me personally, it really has to do with when we're communicating risks, we can weigh people down. And of course, people need to know the information, right? We need to know alcohol is having a negative effect on your mental health, on your physical health, but it's really showing people the benefits, showing people the other side, and kind of breaking down those beliefs that we have around I need alcohol to have fun. I need alcohol to go out with my friends. I need alcohol to relax, unwind, insert whatever reason that you're using alcohol. And by doing that, people can start to more clearly see themselves living that alcohol-free life. And when you talk about, having more empathy and helping remove shame around people who are struggling, I think even if you're not struggling with alcohol, like people listening to this podcast might not necessarily be struggling with alcohol. We all have something that we're struggling with, right? We can all pull from that experience of, there's a trend now on TikTok called your Roman Empire, which is just something you think about all the time. And for me, alcohol was my Roman Empire. I was always thinking about how am I going to quit? How am I going to moderate? How am I going to take a break? But everyone, I think, has that in their life, whether that is their relationship, maybe they're struggling with, or their weight, or family, or work, or career movement, whatever it is. And we can draw on that. And shame can only exist in silence. And so the more we talk about it, the more I've talked about it, the more the shame has lifted. And it's really just about having these conversations like we're having today, talking about it on social media. I remember 5-6 years ago when I was thinking about quitting drinking, there was nothing about this, like nothing about gray area drinking. There was nothing, maybe there was, but it wasn't mainstream as it is today in the papers and in, on social media. And I remember very clearly the first time I ever read an article. It was a Vice article about anxiety, the anxiety you feel after a hangover and some of the science behind that and some people speaking about their experiences. And I literally remember where I was. I was in the US at the time. For those of you who don't know, I was born in the US and I've moved back and forth my whole life. But I was working in a school and I remember reading that Vice article where someone was explaining and articulating what I had been experiencing for like a year and a half by myself, keeping it to myself, not telling anyone. And I remember just feeling so relieved that I wasn't alone, to be able to hear that, oh my God, it's not actually me that's the problem. This is how alcohol interacts with my brain. And that is what the problem is. And so it's interesting to see the balance between how much do we educate and inform versus, turning around to the other side and showing people what life can look like without alcohol and breaking down those beliefs.
Yeah, and I think it is about sharing experiences and stories. I mean, you asked the question, interesting to hear how sharing the science, how it works. Well, we do. That's what we do. We'd like to inform our supporters about the stats, about the science, and, as a way of allowing them to make informed choices. But equally, when it comes to supporting people to make those changes, it's hearing stories such as yours and the people that you interact with that can really help kind of demystify it, but also take that shame away and make it a more compassionate journey. So, you're probably in a really good position to help us share with our listeners really what some practical tips are for people who are thinking about giving up or reducing alcohol. What are some key tips that you can share with us?
Yeah, so it is going to be challenging. It's going to be hard, but staying stuck in the cycle that you're in of having this unhealthy relationship with alcohol, drinking more than you want to, feeling unwell, like that is also hard. And it's one of those personal development things where it goes, choose your hard, choose what you want. It's going to be difficult either way. And something that really actually helped me, and I know that there's, divided opinion regarding this, but alcohol-free drinks really helped me in the early days. I feel like with alcohol-free drinks, you really have to know yourself. You have to know, is this going to make me crave alcohol more, or is it going to help me? And, you can very quickly find that out by trying one. But for me, it really helped to just kind of keep that ritual of, sitting down at the weekend, pouring yourself something into a nice glass and taking a few moments for yourself. And the ritual behind it, rather than what's actually in my glass, I found was what was really, helping me relax and unwind. And a final tip would just be to seek out sober communities, find people in your area. There's so many groups in the UK, honestly, like there's so many groups popping up all over the UK. And now with my group in Ireland, like there's so many communities that you can join. Or even another tip is, if you're not ready to like call yourself sober or, enter that arena, even just joining communities who indirectly don't drink. So for example, people who are getting up and going hiking at 7 o'clock in the morning, they're probably not out the night before. People who are running, who are doing dips in the sea, who are meeting for coffee or playing chess, like random different clubs, like they're probably not drinking a lot, because it doesn't align with, what they're doing. So I would suggest to take a look for those as well.
That's brilliant advice, because for those early morning kind of outdoor physical activity groups, then you also get the benefit of that physical activity as well. So that's a really, really clever idea to kind of help people make those choices in an easier way. But I'm really interested if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit more about these social communities, how they've grown, because as you say, a few years ago, like there was nothing there and they didn't exist, and now it's a big movement. And tell us more about your Sober Social Island too, if you would.
Yeah, so as you said, they have been popping up everywhere. Whenever I quit drinking in 2020, I remember following a girl, Millie Gooch. She's based in the UK. She does a lot of work with Alcohol Change Ireland, or Alcohol Change UK. And she has an organization called Sober Girls Society. And that was the first one that I ever saw where I was like, that's such a good idea. Getting people together, going out. She does a lot of different events. Like, I think they even do like cocktail or mocktail making classes, pole dancing classes, dance classes, like all different kinds of classes. And I remember thinking that's such a good idea, because if I knew that there was something like that going on in my area where I could just book on and join and just be around people who are in a similar position to me, it would be amazing and so fun. Unfortunately, nothing really existed at the time in Ireland whenever I was quitting drinking. And I also should say I quit during the pandemic. I quit in 2020 in May. So it's almost 4 years now.
Wow.
And
Congrats.
So thank you. And I didn't have, like, I couldn't have went anywhere. And I guess there's online communities and different things like that, but I feel like getting out and doing an activity and being in person is just such an invigorating feeling, to just be in a room full of people who you enter the room and you're almost disarmed. You're like, oh, we're all on the same level. A lot of the time we don't even talk about alcohol. We're just talking about how great our lives are without alcohol. But so whenever I was living in Belfast in 2020, whenever I quit, I started posting about my sobriety journey about a month or so in, sharing, basically blogging, like micro blogging, just sharing my experiences. And a few girls reached out to me and said, hey, I'm also in Belfast. I'm also recently quitting drinking. Would you want to meet up for a coffee? And so we started a little group of us. I think there was no more than 10 of us. And every month or so we'd meet for a walk or a coffee. And once we did a sound bath, and that was very fun. But it was just being able to have this little support group in my pocket and to not feel like the odd person out in the room, which I sometimes do feel even 4 years in, right? Because if everyone is drinking and you're not, you are the odd person out in the room, you're not drinking. And so it was so nice to be able to retreat to those spaces, those safe spaces where I felt like we could meet each other on a different level, because there was no pretense, there was no falseness. There was just, everyone coming open and ready to meet a new friend, to hear someone's story, to share their own story, to be heard, to feel seen. And that was an amazing experience. And my partner is from Waterford down south. And so we had the opportunity to move down south to Waterford which is 4.5, 5 hours away from Belfast. And so we did that in March of 2022. So it was quite a big move. We live out in the countryside now. I had lived out in the countryside before whenever I was younger, when I lived here, but it's different as an adult, especially when you work from home. And at the time I wasn't driving. I was doing random stuff for my license, getting that changed after moving. And it was just a very lonely time. And I found myself really missing those friends. And so basically I decided to start a little Instagram page called Sober Girls Ireland. And it just started off as me trying to make some new friends in my area, meet some other sober people who lived locally to me. I started hosting a few Zoom calls because a lot of us were spread out all over the place and I didn't have a car at the time. So you have to work with what you've got. And so that's just kind of started growing. More people were coming to the page. I hosted an afternoon tea in Dublin. I traveled all the way up to go and it was very fun. I think there was 4 or 5 of us. And after that, it just, I think people just really want this. They see all the communities over in the UK, Sober Girls Society. Like I cannot even name all of them. If you just type in Sober UK, I'm sure you'll find a million.
Yeah, because I think our listeners will be very keen to find them in the UK.
Yeah, they're everywhere. And people in Ireland are obviously really hungry for it. And it just kind of blew up last summer. More and more people were coming to the events, and I got asked to speak on Ireland AM, which is a large, national television program on the weekends. And just started talking more and more about it. I was getting all of these radio interviews. People wanted to interview me. I was like, what's going on here? Because right now as well, I also work in research still. I'm a postdoc at UCC, University College Cork, still kind of in the, public health space. My project is a little bit different, but it still has to do with, risk communication in some way, shape or form. And it just kind of exploded and people really wanted it. People really needed it. And so in November of last year, I actually decided to change the name from Sober Girls Ireland to Sober Social Ireland to be more inclusive. The word girls, I feel like it didn't even resonate with mature women, people who were coming to the events. Men kept asking me, can men join? Why aren't men allowed? And I'm like, there's really no reason why men aren't allowed. Like, it's just, I started this. This is what the name I chose at the beginning. After, seeing Millie's Sober Girls Society, I was like, right, Sober Girls Ireland, that's it. That's easy. And with that change, in November of last year, I also launched our online community as well, which is our Substack. So that is a newsletter / meeting place where people can come join, subscribe. It's €5 a month. It's super low cost, but we host community calls once a month, guest workshops around sobriety, habit change, nutrition, just different things like that, that'll help you on your sobriety journey. And it has just really grown. I'm probably missing out on a lot of the details. Feel free to jump in and ask.
What an incredible achievement, Melissa. What a joyful kind of community you've built around yourself, but now also, bringing so many people into it. It's fantastic. We'll make sure to put all those links in our show notes. And, what a transformation. And, congratulations. We're now going to move to our Be Well questions part of the interview, which we ask everybody. And, on the question of alcohol and your journey, I think you've achieved incredible things and you're a wonderful role model. But I want to know, do you have any guilty pleasures?
Of course I do. I'm a human. Of course. I was looking at this question because I was sent a few questions ahead of time. And I have to say, it's probably getting a big old bag of crisps, sitting on the sofa and watching The Real Housewives. Just mindless reality TV.
So what's best, the crisps or The Real Housewives, or both together?
Oh, it has to be the combination. I don't do one without the other, usually.
All right.
It's just it's complete escapism, which I think, obviously, I don't want to be doing that every single day. I think we have enough self-awareness to know that's not something to do every single day. But every week or two, I don't see there being an issue in indulging yourself. You got to have a little bit of that, cheap dopamine every once in a while.
Absolutely. So next question is, what is the next thing that you hope to accomplish on your bucket list, if you have one?
Yeah, I thought about this and immediately my head went to some sort of career milestone or financial milestone or something like that. But really, when thinking about it, my next thing to check off my bucket list is actually getting married. I'm getting married in
Woo!
April of next year.
Oh, how
So
exciting.
it's a very exciting time. So
Yeah.
that's the next thing.
Great. Well, congratulations. And
Thank you.
and final question, which is always an interesting one, is there a book or a film or a podcast that has inspired you to be well?
Yeah, so I think I'm not the only one who says this, but there's a book called The Unexpected Joy of Being Sober by Catherine Gray. She's an English journalist. And that book was really the gateway for myself learning about sobriety. And for so many people that I talk to, they're always telling me how that specific book really changed their perspective on things. I think that it's a really well written book. She's such a great writer, and it really is such an unassuming title, right? She's not saying this is how to quit drinking. She's just showing you the upside or the benefit of sobriety, and that when it comes to, being well, self-care, all of those things, I really view my sobriety as the basis of my self-care. That's really what I view it as. And so that book was really instrumental in opening my eyes to see the way that sobriety can be a way of, radically taking care of yourself and your wellness.
Wonderful. Well, we'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well. So where's the best place for people to find out more about you, Melissa, about your work and about Sober Social Island?
Yeah. So the best place to find us is on Instagram at sobersocial.ie. And that's where we post links to everything. Our Substack, which is the online community, is linked up there. Our Eventbrite page is linked there too. And that's where you can find my own Instagram, which is at melissakelly.phd. And then I also post a little bit on TikTok here and there. So that username is at melissakellyphd as well.
Brilliant. Well, we'll include all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much, Melissa. It's been great to speak to you again and to speak to you, a few years down the track, and to hear so much about the wonderful work you're doing. Thank you ever so much.
Thanks so much, Thalie. Thanks.